You didn't plan to stop here, and that's exactly why this moment has weight, because it caught you mid-motion, mid-scroll, mid-escape, right in the space where you usually move without thinking. And now something has interrupted that momentum and asked you to stay, not politely, not vaguely, but with a firmness that presses against your awareness and says, "This is not random. This is not background noise. This is not another message you can half absorb while your attention is split. This is a moment that only exists because you are here right now, and if you weren't meant to hear it, you wouldn't be hearing it. Because moments like this don't chase people who aren't listening. They don't compete with distraction. They simply appear and wait to see if you recognize them. And the fact that you're still here means something in you felt the interruption before your mind could explain it. You can feel it, that subtle tightening in your chest, that quiet awareness that says something is happening, even though nothing on the surface looks dramatic, because real turning points rarely announce themselves with noise. They arrive quietly, precisely, slipping into ordinary seconds and asking for your full presence as the price of entry. This is why the urge to keep scrolling feels stronger right now, because distraction always flares when something meaningful is about to land, and your habits don't like being challenged, your patterns don't like being paused. Your mind doesn't like being told that this moment matters more than the next 5 minutes of stimulation. But still, here you are. And that matters because attention is not passive. It is a choice. And every choice carries momentum, whether you acknowledge it or not. You've missed moments before like this. Not because you were careless, but because you were busy. Because you told yourself you'd come back later. Because you assumed what mattered would wait for you. And it's only afterward, sometimes much later, that you realized something slipped past you. Something subtle but significant. A chance, a clarity, a shift that never returned in the same form. And you couldn't even point to the exact second it was lost, only to the feeling that followed. The sense that you were just a little out of sync. This moment is different because it's not asking for belief, it's asking for presence. Not faith in outcomes, not certainty about what comes next. Just your willingness to stop moving long enough to let alignment catch up with you, because alignment does not chase a distracted mind. It meets a receptive one. That's why this window feels narrow, why it feels time-bound, why it carries an urgency that isn't loud, but is unmistakable. Because timing is not emotional, it's structural. And when the structure is open, movement is possible. But when it closes, nothing feels wrong on the surface. Life just feels heavier, slower, less responsive, and you don't always know why. Right now, something has intersected your path with intention, not as a reward and not as a test, but as a checkpoint, a place where forward movement depends on whether you notice where you are standing, because most people don't fail because they aren't capable. They fail because they move past moments that were meant to recalibrate them. They keep going with the same assumptions, the same internal pace, the same half-attention, and then they wonder why things don't shift, why effort doesn't translate into momentum, why waiting seems endless. And the answer is rarely effort. It's timing, it's presence. It's the ability to recognize when a moment is asking for you instead of something from you. This is why you're being asked to give 30 minutes, not because time itself is magical, but because 30 uninterrupted minutes is enough to break the rhythm you've been trapped in, enough to move you from reacting to receiving, from scanning to sensing, from waiting for something external to change to allowing something internal to realign. You don't need more information right now. You don't need another plan, another explanation, another promise. You need space, because what's trying to reach you can't land in fragments. It requires wholeness, even briefly. If you walk away now, nothing dramatic will happen. No warning, no consequence you can immediately see. The door will simply close quietly, and you'll keep moving. And later, you may feel that familiar sense of almost, that subtle frustration of knowing you were close to something, but not knowing what it was. But if you stay, if you commit your attention fully, if you let yourself be here without multitasking, without escape, without telling yourself you'll do this later, then something begins to reposition beneath the surface, something you're not meant to see yet, only feel, like pressure shifting before movement begins. This is not motivation. This is alignment. And alignment always starts the same way, with a pause that feels inconvenient to the mind but essential to the path. What's being tested here is not your worth, and it never was, even though you were taught to think in those terms, to measure readiness by confidence, by clarity, by how prepared you feel, but timing doesn't respond to feelings. It responds to recognition, and that's where most people miss it. Right here, at the intersection of closeness and hesitation, where things are near enough to sense but not yet visible enough to prove, and the mind starts negotiating, starts asking for reassurance, starts telling itself that if this were truly important it would be obvious, louder, easier to identify, but the truth is the most consequential moments rarely arrive with certainty. They arrive with an invitation that only feels meaningful if you're quiet enough to hear it. You've been close before, closer than you realized at the time, and you didn't fail because you weren't capable. You failed because you assumed timing was flexible, because you believed you could return to the moment when you felt more ready, more settled, more sure, and you didn't understand that readiness is not a prerequisite. It's a response. This is why the window matters, why this moment feels like it has edges, because alignment doesn't wait for perfection, it waits for presence. And when presence doesn't come, it doesn't argue, it moves on. That's not punishment, it's precision. Right now, something is moving behind the scenes, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but structurally. Pieces shifting into place in ways you won't be able to trace later, only recognized by the speed with which things begin to make sense once they do. And you're not meant to see it yet, because seeing too early would tempt you to interfere, to force, to control. And this phase requires trust, not action, awareness, not effort. This is the part where hesitation has a cost, not because hesitation is wrong, but because it consumes the very thing the moment needs from you, your attention, your consent, your willingness to be fully here without demanding guarantees. Distraction always feels harmless in moments like this because it presents itself as practicality, as efficiency, as responsibility, telling you you'll come back, that this isn't the right time, that life is busy and this can wait. But postponement is rarely neutral. It slowly erodes momentum, and by the time you return, the configuration has changed. You've felt this before. That strange sense of doors closing without a sound, of opportunities dissolving without conflict, of paths becoming unavailable without explanation, and you couldn't point to a single wrong decision, only to a series of small delays that added up to distance. This moment is asking you to notice that pattern, not with judgment but with clarity, because clarity is what alignment restores. This is not encouragement meant to hype you up or push you forward emotionally. This is a recalibration, a subtle internal shift that only happens when you're present enough to receive it. Most people never experience it, not because they aren't chosen, but because they never slow down enough to feel the pull before it passes. They live in reaction, always moving toward the next thing, and they mistake movement for progress, not realizing that direction matters more than speed. If you stay, if you allow yourself to be fully here, something begins to unlock quietly, not in your circumstances yet, but in your perception. And perception is where timing is recognized. You'll start to feel why you were drawn here, not as an idea, but as a knowing, a sense of rightness that doesn't need explanation. Things you stopped trying to force will begin to loosen, not because you did something differently, but because you stopped interfering. And interference often looks like effort when it's actually fear-wearing discipline's clothes. This is the point where most people walk away, where the urge to leave spikes, where the mind gets restless, where doubt disguises itself as logic. And if you've ever wondered why your life feels like it almost lines up but never quite does, this is often where the divergence begins. Staying doesn't mean you understand everything. It means you're willing to trust the moment enough to let it work on you. And that trust is not blind. It's responsive. You felt the pull for a reason. And that sensitivity, that quiet pressure to remain even without clarity, is not common. It's an ability, one that has been trained through years of noticing, of surviving, of learning to listen beneath noise. What comes next doesn't arrive gradually. It begins the instant you stop resisting the pause, because the pause is not an interruption to your life. It is the adjustment your life has been waiting for. This is where readiness stops being a concept and starts becoming a posture, something you inhabit rather than something you wait to feel. Because what's been waiting for you does not respond to potential. It responds to participation. And participation begins the moment you stop asking whether you're ready and start acting as if the answer matters less than the response. You've spent enough time preparing, thinking, refining, healing, questioning, adjusting, telling yourself you were getting closer, and you were. But preparation has a limit, and past that limit it quietly turns into avoidance, a polished form of delay that feels responsible but keeps you stationary. This moment is not asking for more refinement, it's asking for agreement. Agreement is subtle but powerful. It's the internal shift where you stop negotiating with the moment and allow yourself to stand inside it fully, without armor, without rehearsal, without needing to know what the next 10 steps look like. You don't need certainty right now, because certainty would keep you observing instead of engaging. And engagement is what activates what's already been arranged. You've been conditioned to believe that movement follows confidence, but in reality, confidence follows movement. And that's why so many doors remain closed, not because they're locked, but because no one steps toward them long enough for them to respond. When you say, even quietly, "I am ready," something aligns beneath the surface, not emotionally but structurally, like gears finally catching after spinning out of sync. This is not about positive thinking or affirmation. It's about consent, about signaling that you're willing to participate in what's been forming around you instead of waiting for it to arrive fully assembled. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives, it's a decision you make. Often while your hands are still shaking, often while doubt is still present. Because doubt doesn't disqualify readiness. It simply proves that you're stepping beyond what's familiar. Think about how many times you've waited for a sign when you were actually meant to be the signal. How often you've asked for clarity when clarity was waiting on movement. How many moments you delayed because you wanted reassurance first. The pattern has always been the same. Movement first, response second. Not because the universe is withholding, but because alignment requires interaction. What's been prepared for you is complete, but it's dormant until you engage it, like a current that only carries those who step into the water. This is why readiness is spoken, not felt. Words from alignment carry weight because they create direction. They turn intention into trajectory. When you speak readiness, even internally, you shift from passive anticipation into active participation. And that shift is enough to set things in motion. You may not feel different immediately, but something changes nonetheless. Like pressure building before release, like silence before acceleration. This is where waiting ends and stepping forward begins. Not dramatically, not publicly, but decisively. You are standing at a threshold right now, whether you acknowledge it or not. Behind you is repetition, cycles you've outgrown, patterns that taught you but can no longer hold you. Ahead of you is the version of your life that's been forming quietly while you wondered if it was too late, if you missed your chance, if the window had closed. It hasn't, but it is precise, and precision requires response. Stillness had a purpose once. It gave you depth, awareness, resilience, but stillness that outlives its season becomes stagnation. And this moment marks the transition. Action here doesn't mean rushing, forcing, or proving anything. It means consenting to move when movement is called for, even if the path isn't fully visible yet. You've seen this pattern echoed throughout your own life, moments where the outcome only made sense after you acted, where clarity arrived in motion, not before it. The same principle applies now, only the scale is larger, the stakes higher, the alignment deeper. When readiness settles in, acceleration follows naturally. You don't have to chase it, you simply stop resisting it. Opportunities recognize alignment the way doors recognize a key, immediately, without explanation. This is how waiting turns into arrival, how almost becomes already. You don't need to perform readiness, you need to embody it, to let it inform how you stay, how you listen, how you choose in this moment. You are not being asked to leap blindly, you are being asked to step honestly, to meet what's been moving toward you with the same intention it's meeting you with. This is where preparation fulfills its purpose, not by continuing but by concluding. The moment is listening now, and your response is the activation it's been waiting for. Once the decision is made, once readiness moves from thought into consent, acceleration doesn't arrive politely. It arrives decisively, because momentum has been building quietly for longer than you realize. And when alignment is chosen, that stored motion is released all at once. This is the part that feels sudden from the outside, the part people later call luck or coincidence, even though it's neither. Because nothing here is random, it's simply fast. You may notice things beginning to shift almost immediately, conversations opening that were stalled, resistance easing in places that felt locked, paths appearing where logic said there were none, and the speed of it may surprise you, but it shouldn't, because acceleration is not created in the moment, it's revealed by it. What changes first is not your circumstances, but your internal orientation. You stop bracing. You stop second-guessing every step. You stop asking for permission to move forward. And that subtle shift changes how everything responds to you. Life mirrors posture, and when your posture changes from waiting to engagement, the environment recalibrates. People sense it. Opportunities recognize it. Timing begins to work with you instead of against you. This is why things that once required force now begin to flow. Not because you became more capable overnight, but because you became aligned. Acceleration doesn't feel chaotic when you're ready for it. It feels focused, almost orderly. Even when events move quickly, pieces you abandoned because they wouldn't cooperate begin to return on their own, fitting into place without strain. You'll notice how effort decreases while impact increases, how small actions carry disproportionate weight, how doors open with a single step instead of repeated pushing. This is not because the world suddenly became generous. It's because resistance dissolves when alignment is clear. You may feel a mix of excitement and unease here, and that's natural, because acceleration requires trust, and trust stretches you beyond familiarity. The mind may try to slow things down, to reassert control, to question whether this pace is sustainable. But this is not about speed for its own sake, it's about timing being honored. What's unfolding now has been waiting for your participation, and once that participation is given, it moves with precision, not recklessness. The flow feels intelligent, responsive, as if each step reveals the next just in time. This is also where old fears surface briefly, not to stop you but to be released. Doubts you thought were resolved may reappear, habits of hesitation may try to reassert themselves, and that doesn't mean something is wrong. It means momentum is real. Growth always stirs what it's outpacing. The difference now is that fear no longer dictates your movement. It may speak, but it no longer decides. You move anyway, not because fear is gone, but because alignment is stronger. As acceleration builds, you may notice multiple areas of your life shifting at once, not sequentially, but simultaneously. Work, relationships, purpose, clarity, all beginning to respond together, because alignment operates holistically. When one area comes into order, others follow. This orchestration can feel almost surreal, like watching pieces slide into place faster than your mind can narrate. And that's when trust deepens. Not as belief, but as recognition. You've been here before in smaller ways. Moments when everything clicked briefly, when effort dissolved into flow, when timing felt perfect without planning. This is that pattern expanded. Acceleration does not mean you lose discernment. In fact, discernment sharpens. You become clearer about what belongs and what doesn't, what to move toward and what to release. Decisions feel cleaner, less cluttered by doubt. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop negotiating with what's out of alignment. Momentum has a way of clarifying priorities because it doesn't tolerate excess weight. Anything that can't move with you begins to fall away naturally, without conflict, without drama. This phase requires presence just as much as the pause did, because acceleration can be squandered through distraction as easily as alignment can be missed through hesitation. The difference now is that staying present feels easier, more natural, because you're no longer fighting the moment. You're moving with it. Action becomes responsive instead of forced. Effort becomes intentional instead of frantic. You may realize that what once felt like waiting was actually positioning, and what now feels like sudden movement is simply timing being honored. This is how things change decisively, not through constant pushing, but through a single aligned decision that unlocks stored momentum. You didn't create this acceleration, you allowed it. And once allowed, it carries you forward with a strength that feels both powerful and precise. You are no longer standing at the edge, you are in motion now. And motion, once initiated from alignment, does not stall easily. It builds, it compounds, it opens more as you move, and the path ahead begins to reveal itself step by step, not because it was hidden, but because it required movement to be seen. Now you stand inside the crossing itself, not looking at it, not considering it, but occupying it fully, and there is a difference you can feel in your body, in your breath, in the way the moment meets you back, because once you cross a threshold consciously, you don't return to the same internal position again. Something in you has shifted from observer to participant, from waiting to embodiment. And that shift carries authority. This is not authority over others, but authority over your own movement, your own attention, your own consent to what unfolds next. You are no longer asking life to show you who you are becoming. You are responding to it as someone who knows they are already in motion. This is where identity settles, not as a label, but as alignment. You stop trying to convince yourself that you belong here because belonging is no longer theoretical. You are here because you stepped when the moment asked, because you stayed when distraction offered escape, because you answered when postponement would have been easier. Chosen does not mean elevated above anyone else. It means awake enough to respond. It means entrusted with timing, not superiority. And that trust is felt now as a quiet steadiness, a groundedness that doesn't need validation to sustain it. What unfolds from here is not something you manage step by step, it is something you partner with. Partnership changes the tone of effort. You no longer push against life, you move with it. You listen differently. You act with less noise and more precision. You notice how doors don't need to be forced when you approach them aligned. You notice how conversations shift when you speak from clarity instead of urgency. You notice how resistance dissolves not because you defeated it, but because it no longer recognizes you as someone it can delay. There is a sacredness to this phase. Not dramatic, not ceremonial, but lived. Ordinary actions carry weight now. Small choices ripple further. Your presence becomes catalytic. This is how purpose moves in real life, not through grand gestures but through consistent alignment that compounds. You may not see the full scope yet, and you don't need to because vision unfolds at the speed of obedience, and obedience here simply means staying responsive to what is real in front of you, not retreating into fear or fantasy. You may feel a quiet reverence settle in, an awareness that something has been sealed, not by words alone, but by your willingness to step forward honestly. This sealing is not fragile. It does not depend on perfection. It holds through uncertainty, through learning, through moments where you will still question yourself. What has changed is not that doubt disappears, but that doubt no longer determines direction. You move anyway. You choose alignment anyway. You stay present anyway. This is the moment where prayer stops being a request and becomes a posture. Not asking for permission, not asking for proof, simply standing in agreement with what has already been prepared and saying yes with your actions, your attention, your movement. That yes carries momentum. It continues working long after this moment ends because it was not symbolic. It was lived. As you move forward from here, you will recognize this shift by its effects. Things will not just happen to you, they will happen through you. Your life will begin to speak without explanation. Others will sense something different, not because you announce it, but because alignment has a presence of its own. You will find yourself less willing to shrink, less tolerant of misalignment, less inclined to delay what you know requires movement. This is not pressure, it is clarity. The threshold behind you does not close with force, it closes with completion. You do not need to rush back to it or relive it. What mattered was that you responded while it was open. And because you did, the next phase meets you already in motion. You are not catching up anymore. You are participating. So take this moment with you, not as a memory, but as a reference point. When future decisions ask for courage, remember how alignment felt here. When hesitation returns, remember how movement unlocked flow. When doubt whispers that you should wait, remember that waiting ended the moment you chose to step. You are not late. You are not behind. You are precisely where response placed you. The path ahead will continue to reveal itself as long as you remain present, receptive, and willing to move when movement is asked. This is not the end of something. It is the beginning of becoming lived. And now, having stayed, having listened, having responded, you move forward not as someone hoping for change, but as someone aligned with it.